My son laughed at me the moment I put on that old volunteer vest. "Mom, you still wear that thing?" Ethan smirked, glancing at his girlfriend Chloe. "You're basically just handing out blankets. It's not exactly heroic." I felt my chest tighten, but I said nothing. Because a few hours later, standing in the middle of a wildfire evacuation zone in California, something
Thank
happened.
you, truly, from the bottom of our
Ethan
hearts.
never expected. A woman ran
I'm
toward
just so
me,
relieved you are all
tears
safe.
streaming down her face, shouting my name. Then another voice, and another. People weren't just recognizing me. They were thanking me, like I had once saved their lives. And suddenly, my son wasn't laughing anymore. If you've ever felt misunderstood by someone you love, you might understand this story more than you think. Before we go on, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? I always read your stories, and they mean more to me than you know. And if this kind of real emotional storytelling speaks to you, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps this story reach someone who might need it today. I used to believe that silence could protect love. That if I didn't argue, if I didn't defend myself, if I just stayed gentle and patient, then maybe one day my son would come back to me. But the truth is, silence doesn't always heal a relationship. Sometimes it slowly erases it. Ethan Ellsworth was not a cruel child. He used to be the kind of boy who would run into my arms after school. His backpack half open, papers spilling out, telling me everything about his day before I even had the chance to ask. He loved dinosaurs when he was 5 baseball, when he was 10, and by the time he turned 16, he loved numbers order logic, things that made sense. Maybe that's where we started drifting apart, because my life never made sense. After his father Richard passed away, something inside Ethan hardened in a way I couldn't reach. He didn't cry in front of me. He didn't ask questions. He just changed. Quiet at first. Then distant. Then cold. I tried to be enough for both of us. I packed his lunches. I sat in the stands at every game. I stayed up late helping him with homework, even when I didn't understand half of what he was studying anymore. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being mom and became something else. An obligation, a reminder, or maybe a disappointment. Now, at 32, Ethan was everything the world admired. A senior financial analyst in Chicago, a tailored suit, a polished smile, a life that looked perfect from the outside. He lived in a high-rise apartment, drove a car that cost more than my entire house, and spoke about investments and portfolios like they were the only language that mattered. And me, I lived in the same modest home in Ohio where he grew up. I wore comfortable clothes, drove an aging sedan, and spent most of my time volunteering distributing food, organizing shelters, helping people who had lost everything rebuild the smallest pieces of their lives. To Ethan, that wasn't admirable. It was embarrassing. He never said it directly at first. It came in small ways. A sigh when I mentioned a volunteer trip. A forced smile when I talked about the people I helped. A change of subject whenever I tried to share something meaningful. Until eventually the sighs turned into words. "You don't have to do all this, Mom," he told me once over dinner. "You've done enough. Why don't you just enjoy your life?" "I am enjoying my life," I replied softly. He gave me that look, the one that said he didn't believe me. Spending your weekends handing out supplies to strangers? That's not enjoying life. That's, I don't know, avoiding something. Maybe he was right, but not in the way he thought. Chloe Bennett entered Ethan's life about a year ago. She was kind. That was the first thing I noticed. Soft-spoken, well-dressed, the kind of young woman who always said please and thank you, even when Ethan didn't. She worked in marketing, bright, articulate, ambitious. At first, I hoped she might be the bridge between us, someone who could soften him, remind him that life wasn't just about success and status. But over time, I saw something else happen. She started mirroring him, laughing when he made those quiet, dismissive jokes about my volunteering, nodding along when he spoke about real careers and impact. Not cruelly, just subtly, like someone slowly learning what is acceptable in a relationship. That morning, the one that stayed with me long after we were standing in my kitchen, sunlight streamed through the window, catching the dust in the air, illuminating the worn wooden table where Ethan used to do his homework. I was buttoning up my vest. It wasn't anything special. Faded navy blue with the logo of a national disaster relief organization stitched over the chest. The fabric had softened over the years, the edges slightly frayed. But to me, it meant something. It meant purpose. It meant I could still be useful. Ethan leaned against the counter, scrolling through his phone. Chloe stood beside him, holding a cup of coffee, watching quietly. "That thing again," Ethan said without looking up. I paused. "It's just for the trip," I replied. "There's been a wildfire in Northern California. I know what they need, Mom." He cut in, finally glancing at me. "Volunteers, supplies, donations. I get it." There was something in his tone, sharp, dismissive, like he was tired of hearing about it. I smoothed the front of my vest, trying to ignore the tightness in my chest. "I'm leaving in an hour," I said. "You don't have to come." "Oh, I'm coming," he said, straightening up. "This is actually perfect." "Perfect?" I asked. "For a piece I'm working on," he said. "Our firm wants to highlight community engagement. Good PR. I'll document the whole thing. Real people, real stories." Real people. Real stories. I almost smiled at that. If only he knew. Chloe shifted slightly, glancing between us. "That actually sounds meaningful," she said gently. Ethan shrugged. "It'll look good. That's what matters." Then his eyes flicked back to my vest, and he smirked. "Just maybe don't stand too close to me in that thing, okay?" The words landed heavier than I expected. Chloe gave him a quick look. "Ethan," what he said, raising his hand slightly. "I'm just saying, it's not exactly professional." "Professional?" I nodded slowly. "Of course," I said. Because what else was I supposed to say? That this thing he was ashamed of had once been my entire world. That this vest carried memories he had never asked about. That the hands he now dismissed had once held people as they cried, guided families through chaos, made impossible decisions no one should ever have to make. No. I said nothing, like I always did, because arguing wouldn't change how he saw me, because explaining wouldn't undo years of misunderstanding, because somewhere deep down I believed I deserved a part of that judgment. So I picked up my bag, checked the contents one last time, and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, I heard Chloe's voice behind me. "Mrs. Ellsworth." I turned. She hesitated for a moment, then offered a small, uncertain smile. "I think what you do is admirable." The word caught me off guard. Admirable. I nodded. "Thank you, Chloe." Ethan exhaled softly, like the moment had gone on too long. "All right," he said, grabbing his keys. "Let's go. We've got a flight to catch." And just like that, we stepped out into the morning light. 3 people, heading toward the same destination, but carrying completely different truths. There are parts of our lives we bury so deeply, even the people closest to us never know they exist. Not because we want to lie, but because the truth feels too heavy to place in someone else's hands. As we boarded the plane to California, Ethan slipped seamlessly into his world, laptop open, phone buzzing, Messages flying back and forth between colleagues. Numbers, schedules, deadlines, everything precise, everything controlled, everything safe. I sat by the window, my hands folded in my lap, watching the ground slowly disappear beneath us. Clouds rose to meet us like a quiet curtain separating the present from everything I had tried to leave behind. I hadn't been back to California in years, not since before I stepped away, before I chose silence, before I became someone even my own son didn't recognize. "You okay?" Chloe's voice came softly from the aisle seat. I turned to her, surprised. "Yes," I said, offering a small smile. "Just thinking." She studied me for a moment like she wanted to ask more, but she didn't. Ethan didn't even look up. That was the thing about Ethan. He didn't ask questions anymore. Not about me, not about the past, and maybe that was my fault, because I had trained him not to. Years ago, when he was still young enough to sit beside me on the couch, he used to ask things like, "What did you do before, Mom? Why do people call you sometimes in the middle of the night? Why do you leave so suddenly sometimes?" And every time I gave him the same kind of answer. Simple, vague, safe. "I help people, sweetheart." That was all I ever said. I never told him how. I never told him where. I never told him what it cost. The truth is, there was a time when my phone never stopped ringing. Not for family, not for friends, but for emergencies, for disasters, for moments when everything had already gone wrong and someone needed to decide what happened next. I wasn't just a volunteer. I was a coordinator, a decision maker, a person people looked to when things fell apart. Hurricanes, floods, wildfires, tornadoes. I had stood in the middle of all of them, not as a hero, but as someone who couldn't walk away. I remember Hurricane Katrina like it was yesterday. The heat, the smell of water that had been sitting too long, the sound of people calling out names that would never be answered. We worked for days without sleep, coordinating rescue boats, directing medical teams, finding shelters for families who had nothing left but the clothes they were wearing. I remember standing on a rooftop shouting directions over the roar of helicopters, my voice nearly gone. Someone had asked me, "How do you keep going?" And I didn't have an answer. I just did. Because stopping wasn't an option. That was who I was. That was the life I chose. And for a long time, I believed it was the right one. But lives like that, they don't exist without consequences. You don't get to stand in the middle of chaos every day and expect your own life to remain untouched. You don't get to save everyone, no matter how hard you try. The plane hit a pocket of turbulence, jolting slightly. Chloe's hand tightened around the armrest. Ethan didn't react. I barely noticed, because my mind had already drifted somewhere else, somewhere I tried not to go. There was a moment years ago when everything changed. Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once, like a door slamming shut, and once it closed. Nothing was ever the same again. I had been in the field, another disaster, another urgent call, another decision that couldn't wait, and somewhere miles away, my life was unraveling in a way I didn't see until it was too late. After that day, I stopped taking calls, stopped leading operations, stopped being the person everyone depended on. Not because I couldn't do it anymore, but because I couldn't live with what it had taken from me. So I stepped back, quietly, no announcements, no explanations. I became smaller, a volunteer instead of a leader, a helper instead of a decision maker, someone who handed out supplies instead of directing entire operations. It was easier that way, safer. And for a while, I convinced myself it was enough, that I could still make a difference just on a smaller scale. that I didn't need the responsibility, that I didn't need the weight. But what I never realized was how it looked from the outside. To Ethan, I wasn't someone who had stepped away from something bigger. I was just someone who had never been anything more. Someone who spent her days doing small, invisible things. Someone whose life didn't seem to add up to anything significant. And maybe I was just someone who had never been anything more. Someone who spent her days doing small, invisible things. Someone whose life didn't seem to add up to anything significant. And maybe that was my fault, because I never told him otherwise. The plane began its descent. The clouds parted slowly, revealing dry land below. Golden hills, patches of blackened earth, smoke still lingering in the distance like a scar that hadn't healed. California. Even from above, you could see the damage. The places where fire had taken everything. Ethan finally closed his laptop. "Looks bad," he muttered. "Yes," I said quietly. "It always is." He glanced at me, just for a second, like he almost wanted to ask something, but then he looked away. Back to what was familiar. Back to what made sense to him. Chloe leaned forward slightly, peering out the window. "It's hard to imagine losing everything like that," she said softly. I nodded. "Yes," I replied. "It is." But what I didn't say was that I didn't have to imagine it. I had seen it, over and over again, and every time. It changed something inside me. The wheels touched the runway with a heavy thud, a reminder that we had arrived, not just in a new place, but in a moment that would change everything. Ethan stretched slightly, already shifting into work mode. "All right," he said. "Let's get some real footage. This could turn into something big, something big." I closed my eyes for just a moment, because I knew something he didn't. This wasn't going to be a story he controlled. This wasn't going to be a clean narrative he could package and present. Because the truth. I closed my eyes for just a moment, because I knew something he didn't. This wasn't going to be a story he controlled. This wasn't going to be a clean narrative he could package and present. Because the truth was already waiting for him, right there, on the ground, and once he saw it, there would be no going back. The air hit me the moment we stepped outside the airport. Dry, heavy, and laced with something that never quite leaves once you recognize it. Smoke. Not the kind from a fireplace or a distant barbecue. This was different. It clung to your throat. It settled into your lungs. It carried the quiet, invisible weight of everything that had already been lost. Ethan pulled his suitcase behind him, glancing around with mild curiosity. "It doesn't look that bad," he said. I didn't answer, because I knew better. Disasters rarely reveal themselves all at once. They hide in the details, in what's missing, in what's been erased. We drove for nearly 2 hours, heading north toward the evacuation zone. The further we went, the quieter everything became. Less traffic, fewer people, more signs, emergency routes, closed roads, detours. And then we saw it. The first stretch of land where the fire had passed. Trees stood blackened and hollow like skeletons, reaching toward the sky. Entire sections of forest reduced to ash. The ground itself looked wounded, dark, uneven, stripped of life. Chloe leaned forward in her seat, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh my God, Ethan didn't say anything this time. He just reached for his phone, started recording. "Stay with me," he muttered, turning slightly toward Chloe. "This is good footage. Good footage." I looked out the window again, and all I could think was, there is nothing good about this. We arrived at the relief center just before noon. It had been set up in what used to be a high school gymnasium. now filled with rows of cots, tables stacked with supplies, and people moving in quiet urgency. The parking lot was crowded. Volunteers, emergency vehicles, families sitting beside what little they had managed to save. I stepped out of the car slowly, and for a moment, everything inside me went still. It was always like this, that first second, the one where the past and the present overlap so completely you can't tell them apart. Then, my body remembered what to do. I adjusted my vest, picked up my bag, and started walking. Ethan followed behind me, already speaking into his phone. Day one on site, he said, his tone shifting into something polished, controlled. We're here at a wildfire evacuation center in Northern California where hundreds of residents have been displaced. I tuned him out because something else had already caught my attention. The movement, the rhythm, the unspoken coordination of people trying to hold things together. It was familiar. Too familiar. A young volunteer approached the entrance, checking names and directing arrivals. Inside, I could hear voices overlapping. Children crying, someone asking for medication, someone else calling out for a missing relative. I stepped through the doors. And just like that, I was back. Not in time, but in feeling, in instinct, in the quiet understanding of how quickly everything could fall apart. "Excuse me," a volunteer said, approaching me. "Are you here to register?" "Yes," I replied. She handed me a clipboard without looking up. "Fill this out, and we'll assign you a section." I nodded, taking the form. Ethan hovered nearby, scanning the room with interest. "This is intense," he said under his breath. Chloe didn't respond. She was watching a little girl sitting on a cot, clutching a stuffed animal that was half covered in soot. The child's eyes were wide, not crying, just empty. I felt something tighten in my chest, because I had seen that look before. Too many times. I finished filling out the form and handed it back. The volunteer glanced at it quickly, then paused. Her eyes moved back to my name, Monica Ellsworth. For a second, she didn't say anything. Then she looked up at me. Really looked this time. Her expression shifted, subtle but unmistakable. "Ellsworth," she repeated. "Yes," I said. She hesitated, like she was trying to place something. Then she shook her head slightly, handing me a badge. "Food distribution," she said. "Table 3. "Thank you," I replied. It wasn't the first time. That flicker of recognition. That almost memory. But it passed quickly. Like it always did. Ethan let out a quiet breath. "Table 3, he repeated. "Sounds about right." I turned to him. "What does that mean?" He shrugged. "I mean, it's what you do, right? Hand out food. Keep people comfortable." There it was again. That tone, that quiet dismissal wrapped in something that almost sounded reasonable. Chloe glanced at him, then at me. "Ethan," she said softly. "What?" he replied. "I'm just saying, it's important work, just not exactly leadership." Leadership? I almost smiled, because if there was one thing I had learned over the years, it was that leadership rarely looks the way people expect it to. "It'll be over there," I said, gesturing toward the tables. Ethan nodded, already stepping back. "Great," he said. "I'll get some interviews." Of course he would. He moved through the room with confidence, approaching people, introducing himself, asking questions. Chloe lingered for a moment. Then she followed him. And I was left alone. Or at least, that's what it looked like. But I wasn't alone. Not really. Because this place, this chaos, this quiet, fragile order trying to hold everything together, it spoke a language I understood. I moved toward table 3. The supplies were stacked neatly: bottled water, canned food, blankets. A few volunteers stood nearby, organizing items. One of them, an older man with graying hair, glanced up as I approached. "Need a hand?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, we're trying to keep things moving, but it's a bit overwhelming." I stepped beside him without hesitation. "Let's separate the essentials first," I said. "Water here. Ready-to-eat food here. Blankets in the back so they don't get grabbed all at once." He blinked, then nodded quickly. Yeah, that makes sense." We started moving. Not fast, not frantic, but with purpose. Within minutes, the flow changed. People moved through the line more smoothly. Volunteers adjusted without needing to be told twice. It wasn't something you could see immediately, but you could feel it. The difference between chaos and direction. I kept my head down, focused on the work, because that was where I belonged. That was where things made sense. Across the room, I caught a glimpse of Ethan. He had stopped recording. His phone lowered slightly. His eyes fixed not on the people, but on me, watching, observing, like he was seeing something he didn't quite understand. I turned away before our eyes could meet, because I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. Not here. Not in a place where the past was already starting to surface in ways neither of us could control. And somewhere in that crowded room, without either of us realizing it yet, the first crack had already begun to form. It started with a look. Not a word, not a question, just a look. I didn't notice it at first. I was too focused on the rhythm of the work, the steady flow of people moving past the table, the quiet exchanges, the careful distribution of supplies, so no one would be left without. "Water," I asked gently, handing a bottle to an elderly man. "Thank you," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he took it. Behind him, a young mother stepped forward, holding a toddler on her hip. "2 blankets, please," she said softly. "Of course," I replied, reaching behind me. It was simple work, quiet work. The kind that doesn't draw attention. The kind I had chosen for a reason. But then I felt it. That shift in the air. The way someone lingers just a second too long. The way eyes don't move on as quickly as they should. I looked up. Across the table, a woman stood still, her gaze fixed on me. Mid-40s maybe, dust on her clothes. Ash smudged along her sleeves. Her hands were clenched tightly together, like she had forgotten why she had come up to the table in the first place. "Mom," I said gently. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer right away. She just kept staring, like she was trying to solve something, like she was looking at a memory she couldn't quite place. Then she took a small step forward. "Your name," she said slowly. "What did you say your name was?" I hesitated, just for a moment, because this had happened before. Not often, but enough. "Monica," I said quietly. "Monica Ellsworth." The moment the words left my mouth, something changed in her face. Recognition, not uncertainty, not doubt. Recognition. Her breath caught. "No," she whispered. I felt my chest tighten. She shook her head slightly, like she was trying to convince herself she was wrong. But her eyes never left mine. "It can't be," she said again, softer this time. Behind her, the line began to slow. People shifted impatiently, but I couldn't look away. Because I had seen that expression before, and I knew what came next. "I'm sorry," I said gently. "Do we know each other?" She let out a shaky breath. Then suddenly, she laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because the moment had become too overwhelming to hold in. "Oh my God," she said, her voice breaking. "It's you!" The words seemed to ripple outward. A few nearby volunteers glanced over. I felt the familiar instinct rise in my chest. Step back, deflect. Keep things quiet. You might be mistaken, I said softly. But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't work, because she was already shaking her head. No, she said firmly. No, I'm not. And then deflect. Keep things quiet. You might be mistaken, I said softly. But even as I said it, I knew it wouldn't work, because she was already shaking her head. No, she said firmly. No, I'm not. And then she stepped around the table. Before I had time to react, she wrapped her arms around me, tight, desperate, like she had been waiting years for this moment. I froze, my hands hovering in the air for a second before slowly, cautiously, I placed them against her back. I don't understand, I said quietly. She pulled back just enough to look at me, her eyes filled with tears. You saved us, she said. The words hit me harder than I expected, because they weren't just words. They were a door, one I had spent years keeping closed. I think I started. 15 years ago, she interrupted, her voice trembling. There was a wildfire near Sacramento. My husband, my daughter, and we were trapped. The road was blocked. The fire was everywhere. My breath caught. Sacramento. I remembered. I remembered too well. There was chaos, she continued. People were panicking. No one knew where to go. And then you showed up. My breath caught. Sacramento. I remembered. I remembered too well. There was chaos, she continued. People were panicking. No one knew where to go. And then you showed up. I felt something inside me shift. Slow, unavoidable. You told us to stay low, she said. You organized everyone. You got the emergency crews to open a path. You stayed behind until every single person got out. Her voice broke completely. You didn't leave anyone. The room had gone quieter, not silent, but different, like something important had entered the space. I shook my head slightly. That was a long time ago, I said. But even as I said it, I could feel the weight of it returning. Not the pride, never the pride, just the memory, the responsibility. You don't remember me? She said softly. And that was the truth. Not because she didn't matter, but because there had been so many faces, so many lives intersecting in moments of fear and urgency. I'm sorry, I said gently. She smiled through her tears. It's okay, she whispered. You weren't saving one person. You were saving all of us. Behind her, someone spoke. Wait, what did she say her name was? Another voice followed. Ellsworth, did she say? Ellsworth? I felt it then. That ripple. The one I had been trying to avoid. The one that spreads faster than you can stop it. Ethan's voice cut through from across the room. Mom! I turned. He was standing still, his phone lowered at his side. Chloe beside him, her eyes wide. What's going on? He asked. I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know how to. Because this wasn't something I could explain in a single sentence. Because the truth was already beginning to speak for itself. The woman, her arms still lightly holding on to mine, turned toward Ethan. She's your mother, she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, she let out a breathless laugh. You have no idea, she said. Ethan frowned slightly. No idea about what I closed my eyes for just a moment, because I knew what was coming, and I knew there was no stopping it now. Ethan took a slow step closer. Then another. Like he wasn't entirely sure what he was walking into, but couldn't stop himself from moving forward. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice quieter now. Not dismissive, not confident, just uncertain. The woman, Laura Jenkins, though Ethan didn't know her name yet, turned fully toward him, still holding on to my arm, like she needed to stay anchored to something real. "I mean," she said, her voice trembling, but steadying with each word, "your mother saved my family's life." Ethan blinked. Once. Then again, like his mind was trying to catch up with something it didn't recognize. "That's," he started, then stopped. He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "That's not possible," he said, shaking his head. "You must have her confused with someone else." I felt the words land. Not harshly, not cruelly, just instinctively. Because this version of me, the one he knew, didn't match the story he was hearing. Laura's expression softened, but there was something firm beneath it. "No," she said gently. "I don't." She looked back at me, her eyes searching mine, asking for something. Permission. Acknowledgement. Truth. I hesitated, because I had spent so many years stepping away from these moments, letting them pass, letting people hold their gratitude without turning it into something bigger. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Ethan, and the distance that had grown between us, built on silence. So I nodded, just slightly. Laura inhaled sharply, like she had been holding her breath. "It was August," she said, turning back to Ethan. 15 years ago. The wildfire outside Sacramento spread faster than anyone expected. Entire neighborhoods were evacuated overnight. Her voice steadied as she spoke, like the memory was guiding her now. "My husband was trying to get us out," she continued. "We had our daughter. She was only 3 at the time, in the back seat. We thought we had time." Ethan listened, really listened. For the first time that day, his phone remained at his side. "We didn't," she said. The words hung in the air. The fire jumped the road. Trees were falling. Smoke was so thick we couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. Cars started stopping. People panicked. Her hands tightened slightly. "We got stuck," she whispered. "Right there in the middle of it." I closed my eyes briefly, because I could see it, not just hear it. The chaos, the fear, the decisions that had to be made in seconds. "No one knew what to do," she said. "Some people tried to turn around. Others just froze." She looked at me again. "But then she showed up." Ethan followed her gaze. Slowly, almost reluctantly. "You came out of nowhere," Laura said, her voice filled with something deeper, now. Something that had never faded. "You weren't yelling. You weren't panicking. You just started giving instructions." My chest tightened, because I remembered that moment, the weight of it. "You told us to stay low in our cars," she continued. "You organized people into groups. You got the emergency responders on the radio and made them listen to you." Ethan frowned slightly. "Made them listen," he repeated. Laura nodded. "They didn't know what to do either," she said. Everything was moving too fast, but she did. Her grip on my arm tightened. She took control. The words echoed in the space between us. Ethan looked at me again. Longer this time. Searching. Like he was trying to find that person in the woman standing in front of him. "But that's not even the part I'll never forget," Laura said softly. Ethan's attention snapped back to her. "What is it?" he asked. Laura's eyes filled with tears again. "They told us to move," she said. "One lane had been cleared, just enough for a few cars to get through at a time. Her voice wavered. We were near the back. I felt my breath slow. Because I knew exactly where this was going. People were pushing forward, she continued, trying to get out. And you stayed behind. Ethan's brow furrowed. What do you mean? She didn't get into one of the cars. Laura said, her voice breaking. She stayed on the road, guiding everyone else out, making sure no one got left behind. Ethan stared at her. But why, he asked? The question was simple, but it carried everything he didn't understand. Laura didn't hesitate, because that's who she is, she said. Silence followed, not empty, heavy, full. You kept counting, Laura went on, her voice softer now. You kept asking if anyone was missing, if anyone was still out there. I swallowed hard, because that part never leaves you. And when my daughter started crying, Laura said, her voice shaking again, you came to our car. You opened the door. You knelt down right in front of her. Ethan's eyes flickered. You told her it was going to be okay, Laura whispered. You told her she was brave. Her lips trembled. And then you closed the door and sent us ahead. The room felt smaller, like everything had drawn inward. Did you get out? Ethan asked quietly. Laura nodded. Yes, she said. We made it out. She paused, but when we looked back, you were still there. Ethan's breath caught slightly. You were still standing in the road, she said, making sure everyone else got through. Her voice broke completely. I never got to thank you, she whispered. Not properly, not until now. I looked down for a moment, because I didn't know what to do with that kind of gratitude. I never had. You don't owe me anything, I said softly. Laura shook her head immediately. No, she said. That's not true. Ethan stepped closer. Slow, careful, like he was afraid the moment might disappear if he moved too fast. Mom, he said quietly. I looked up at him, and for the first time in years, I saw something different in his eyes. Not judgment, not distance, but something uncertain, something shifting. Why didn't you ever tell me? He asked. The question landed deeper than anything else that had been said, because it wasn't about the past. It was about everything that came after. I held his gaze, and for a moment, I didn't have an answer, because the truth was far more complicated than he was ready to hear. The silence didn't last long. It never does, not when truth begins to surface. What do you mean, I have no idea? Ethan asked, his voice tighter now, not defensive, not dismissive, but unsettled. Laura looked at him carefully, like she was trying to measure how much he could handle. Then she said something that changed everything. I mean, your mother wasn't just a volunteer, she said. She was the one people followed. The words hung in the air like something fragile and powerful. Ethan's eyes flickered. That's not, he started, but his voice trailed off. Because before he could finish, another voice cut in. She's right. We all turned. An older man stepped forward, slowly leaning on a cane. His clothes were clean but worn. His face lined with the kind of years that come from surviving more than most people ever should. He looked at me, and then he smiled, a quiet, knowing smile. I thought it was you, he said. My chest tightened. Mr. Dawson, I said softly, the name slipping out before I could stop it. Ethan's head snapped toward me. You know him. Mr. Dawson chuckled lightly. She remembers, he said. Then he looked back at Ethan. She always does. Ethan frowned, confusion deepening. What's going on? He asked. Mr. Dawson took another step closer. Floods, he said simply. Mississippi. Must have been, 10 years ago now? I nodded slowly. Yes. You were there for 5 days straight, he continued. Didn't sleep, didn't leave. His eyes grew distant for a moment, pulled back into memory. My house was gone, he said. Everything I had just washed away. You were there for 5 days straight, he continued. Didn't sleep, didn't leave. His eyes grew distant for a moment, pulled back into memory. My house was gone, he said. Everything I had just washed away. Ethan shifted slightly, his attention fully locked now. No one could reach us at first, Mr. Dawson said. Water was too high. Roads were gone. He paused, but she found a way. Ethan glanced at me again, and this time there was something else in his eyes. Not just confusion, but doubt. Doubt in everything he thought he knew. She organized boats, Mr. Dawson said. Got volunteers where they weren't supposed to be able to go. He let out a small breath. And when they told her it was too dangerous, he smiled faintly. She didn't listen. A few people nearby let out quiet, knowing laughs. Because they understood. Because they had seen it too. Ethan shook his head slightly. But that doesn't make sense, he said. She never told you. Mr. Dawson finished gently. Ethan didn't answer, because the answer was obvious. No, Mr. Dawson said. She wouldn't. Why not? Ethan asked. That question lingered, heavy, unanswered. Before anyone could respond, another voice spoke up. She helped my sister, a younger woman this time, standing near the back of the gathering that had begun to form. She was trapped in a collapsed building after the tornado in Oklahoma, she said, stepping forward. They said it was too unstable to go in. Her eyes moved to me. But you went anyway? I closed my eyes briefly, because I remembered that one, too clearly. You found her? The woman said, her voice trembling. Pulled her out yourself. Ethan let out a slow breath. This time he didn't argue, didn't interrupt. He just listened. And that was the moment I realized something had shifted. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Because for the first time, he wasn't trying to correct the story. He was trying to understand it. The room had changed. What had started as a simple interaction had become something else entirely. A quiet gathering. A circle of voices. Each one carrying a piece of a story Ethan had never been told, and each one adding weight to something he could no longer ignore. You coordinated the evacuation in Texas too, didn't you? Someone else asked. And the shelters in Florida after the hurricane. Another voice added. You stayed with us all night, a third said. You made sure we had medicine, another. You kept checking on my kids. You didn't leave. You never leave. The words overlapped, not chaotic, but layered, like memories finding their way back into the present. Ethan stood in the middle of it all, still, silent. His gaze moved from one person to another, then back to me, and I could see it, that crack, the one that had started forming earlier, now widening. You're saying? He began slowly, his voice careful. She did all of this. No one answered immediately, because the answer didn't need to be spoken anymore. It was everywhere around him, in their faces, in their voices, in the way they looked at me, not with admiration, but with something deeper. Gratitude, respect, memory. Yes, Chloe said softly. We all turned to her. She hadn't spoken much until now, but her eyes were different too, clearer, more certain. I think she did, she added. Ethan looked at her, then back at me, and for a moment, he didn't say anything, because he didn't know what to say, because everything he had believed about me was unraveling, and when belief unravels, it doesn't do it neatly. It doesn't give you time to adjust. It just breaks. You never told me, he said finally. His voice wasn't accusing this time. It was something else, something quieter, something closer to hurt. I met his gaze. I didn't think it mattered, I said softly. That wasn't entirely true, but it was the only part of the truth I could give him for now. He stared at me, like he was trying to see me for the first time. Not as his mother, not as the woman he had dismissed, but as someone he didn't know at all. And that was harder than anything else, because distance is one thing, but realizing you never truly understood someone, that's something else entirely. The room slowly began to settle. People returned to what they had been doing. The moment easing, but not disappearing. Because once something like this is revealed, it doesn't go back to the way it was before. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. This doesn't make sense, he muttered. I didn't respond, because I knew what was coming next. The questions. The ones I had avoided for years. The ones that didn't just ask what happened, but why. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. He wasn't ready for those answers yet. Not fully, not completely. But he was closer than he had ever been. And for the first time in a very long time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, the truth might finally find its way between us. There are moments in life that don't just change you. They divide your life into two parts, before and after. Ethan's question still hung in the air. Why didn't you tell me I could feel every eye in the room slowly drifting away, giving us space? Not out of disinterest, but out of respect, because they understood something Ethan didn't yet. Some stories don't belong in public. Some truths are too heavy to carry out loud. I took a slow breath, and for the first time in years, I didn't look away. There was a reason, I said quietly. Ethan stepped closer. What reason? He asked. His voice wasn't sharp anymore. It wasn't judgmental. It was searching, and that made it harder, because I couldn't hide behind his distance anymore. You remember the year your father got sick? I asked. His expression shifted immediately. Confusion, then recognition. Of course I do, he said. That is when everything... He stopped, because something in my face must have told him there was more. That wasn't the beginning, I said softly. It was the end. The words landed heavier than anything else I had said so far. Ethan frowned. I don't understand. No. Of course he didn't. Because I had never let him. Your father didn't get sick overnight, I continued. He had been struggling for months. Ethan's brow furrowed deeper. Why didn't you tell me that I swallowed? Because you were 16, I said. Because you had your whole life ahead of you. Because I thought I could handle it. But that wasn't the whole truth. Not even close. The truth is, I said, my voice quieter. Now I wasn't home enough to see how bad it had gotten. The words felt like they were pulling something out of me. Something I had kept buried for years. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but I could see it in his eyes. The beginning of understanding, and the fear that came with it. There was another wildfire, I said. The room seemed to fade away around us. It spread faster than anyone predicted. Entire towns were being evacuated. Communications were failing. Emergency teams were overwhelmed. My hands trembled slightly. I clasped them together. I got the call in the middle of the night, I continued. They needed someone to coordinate the evacuation zones, someone with experience. Ethan's voice was barely audible. And you went. It wasn't a question. It was a realization. Yes, I said. I didn't look away, because this was the part I had avoided for too long. I told your father I'd be back in 2 days, I said. My throat tightened, but 2 days turned into 4, then 6, then 10. I could feel the memory rising around me now. The smoke, the urgency, the constant pressure of decisions that couldn't wait. There were people trapped, I said. Families who couldn't get out. Roads blocked. Fires spreading faster than anyone could predict. I closed my eyes for a moment. They needed someone to make decisions, I whispered. To choose who got help first. Who could wait. Who? My voice broke slightly. Who might not make it? Ethan's breath caught. Because now he was starting to understand the weight of what I had carried. I kept telling myself I would leave, I said. That I would go home. That I would check on your father. But I didn't. Because every time I tried, something else happened. Another call, another emergency, another life hanging in the balance. And then I said, my voice barely steady. I got a message. Ethan's eyes locked onto mine. What message? I swallowed hard. From a neighbor, I said. She said your father had collapsed. The room felt like it had gone completely still. Even the background noise seemed to fade. I tried to leave, I said. I really did, but I could feel it again. That moment, that impossible choice. There was a group of people trapped on the north side of the fire. Even the background noise seemed to fade. I tried to leave, I said. I really did, but I could feel it again. That moment, that impossible choice. There was a group of people trapped on the north side of the fire. I continued. The wind had shifted. The road they were on was about to be cut off completely. My hands tightened. If no one got to them in time, they wouldn't survive. Ethan shook his head slowly. No, he whispered. I nodded. They needed someone to guide the rescue teams, I said. Someone who knew the terrain. Someone who could coordinate the evacuation before the fire closed in. My voice dropped to a whisper. And I was the only one there who could do it. Ethan's face had gone pale. So you stayed, he said. Again, not a question, a realization. Yes. The word felt heavier than anything I had ever said. I stayed. Silence. Not empty, not distant, but suffocating. By the time I got home, I continued, my voice trembling. Now it was too late. Ethan closed his eyes. Just for a second. But it was enough. Because I saw it. The moment everything connected. The moment his memories and my truth collided. You chose them, he said quietly. The words weren't angry. They weren't loud. But they cut deeper than anything else. Because they carried something I had lived with for years. Yes, I whispered. I did. There it was. The truth. Unfiltered, unprotected. I felt the weight of it settle between us. Heavy, unavoidable. But you need to understand something, I said, my voice steadier now. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak, but he listened. I didn't choose them instead of your father, I said. I chose the people who didn't have anyone else. The words hung in the air, fragile, complicated. I thought I could save everyone, I continued. I thought I could finish the job and still make it back in time. My voice broke, but I was wrong. That was the part that never changed, no matter how many years passed, no matter how many lives were saved. That one moment stayed. Ethan opened his eyes slowly, and when he looked at me again, there was something new there. Not just confusion, not just hurt, but something deeper, something that hurt to see. Understanding, and the beginning of a question he wasn't ready to ask yet, but would. Soon, you chose them. Ethan's words didn't echo. They sank. Deep, heavy, like something finally said out loud that had been waiting years to be spoken. I didn't move, didn't defend myself, because there was no easy defense for a truth like that. Yes, I had said, and now? We were standing in what came after. Ethan let out a slow, unsteady breath, running his hand through his hair again. He turned away from me, pacing a few steps like he needed space just to think. No, he muttered. No, that's not. He stopped, because he couldn't finish the sentence, because the truth didn't leave room for denial anymore. You always told me you were helping people, he said, turning back toward me, his voice rising. You made it sound like something small, something simple. His eyes searched mine, accusing now. Not just confused. You never said you were making decisions like that. He continued. You never said you were choosing who lives and who. He cut himself off. But the word had already landed between us. Dies. I felt it. That old familiar weight pressing against my chest. I didn't want you to carry that. He cut himself off, but the word had already landed between us. Dies. I felt it, that old familiar weight pressing against my chest. I didn't want you to carry that, I said quietly. But I carried it anyway, he shot back. The sudden intensity of his voice caused a few heads to turn. Chloe stepped closer, her expression tense. Ethan, she said softly. But he didn't hear her, or maybe he couldn't. Do you have any idea what it felt like growing up? He demanded, his voice shaking now. Watching you leave all the time. Not knowing where you were. Not knowing if you were even coming back. I closed my eyes for just a moment. Because yes, I did know. I thought you didn't care about us, he said. The words hit harder than anything else. Because they weren't about the past. They were about how he had lived with it. I thought whatever you were doing out there mattered more than we did. I opened my eyes again, and the pain in his face. It was something I had never fully allowed myself to see. Not like this. Not this clearly. That's not true, I said, my voice steady but soft. Then what is true? He demanded. Silence. Because that question didn't have a simple answer. You said you thought you could save everyone? He continued, his voice cracking slightly. But you didn't. He took a step closer. You didn't save him. The words landed like a blow, not unexpected, but still unavoidable. Chloe gasped quietly beside him. Ethan, stop. No, he said, shaking his head. No, I need to understand this. His eyes locked onto mine again. You stayed there, he said. You stayed with strangers while Dad was dying. Each word felt sharper than the last, and now I'm supposed to what he continued. Be proud of that. Be grateful. There it was. The anger, the grief, the confusion that had been building for years, now finally breaking through. I'm not asking you to be proud, I said. Then what are you asking? He snapped. I hesitated, because the truth wasn't something I had ever asked him to understand. But maybe I should have. I'm asking you to see the whole picture, I said quietly. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. The whole picture, he repeated. You mean the part where my mom chose strangers over her own family? I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not defensiveness, but something deeper, something steady. No, I said. I mean the part where your mother stood in a place where no one else would and made sure people didn't die alone. The words hung in the air, firm, unshaken. Ethan stared at me, and for a second, he didn't know how to respond. Do you think I didn't want to be there? I continued, my voice stronger now. Do you think I didn't want to come home? I took a step towards him. Do you think I didn't replay that moment over and over again, wondering if I could have done something differently? My voice trembled now, not with weakness, but with the weight of truth. I live with that every single day, Ethan. The room had gone completely quiet. Even the distant noise of the relief center seemed to fade. Every life I couldn't save, I said. Every moment I wasn't there when I should have been. I shook my head slightly. You think I forgot? I whispered. You think I moved on? Ethan's expression shifted. Just slightly, because now he was seeing something he hadn't before. Not just the decision, but the cost. I didn't tell you, I continued, because I didn't want you to carry my regrets. He swallowed hard. But you carried them anyway, I added, just in a different way. Silence fell again. But this time, it was different. Not explosive, not sharp, but heavy. Ethan looked down at the ground, his shoulders rising and falling with a slow breath. I don't know how to feel about this, he admitted quietly, and that was the first honest thing he had said since the argument began. You don't have to know right now, I said. He looked up again. And you don't have to forgive me, I added. The words were difficult, but necessary, because forgiveness isn't something you demand. It's something that has to find its own way. I just needed you to know, I said softly. Ethan stared at me, long, quiet, like he was seeing not just me, but everything behind me. All the years, all the choices, all the things I had never said. And for the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't push back. He just stood there, trying to understand something that couldn't be simplified. Chloe stepped closer to him, placing a gentle hand on his arm. He didn't pull away, but he didn't respond either, because he was somewhere else now. Somewhere between anger and understanding. Somewhere unfamiliar. And maybe that was where healing begins. Not with answers, not with forgiveness, but with the willingness to stay. Even when everything feels broken. The argument didn't end. It just paused, like a storm pulling back for a breath before crashing again. Ethan stood there, still processing, still caught somewhere between anger and something he didn't yet have a name for. And then everything changed. A loud crash echoed from the far side of the gym. Metal. Wood. Something heavy hitting the ground. People screamed. Not loud. Not chaotic, but sharp. Instinctive. I turned immediately. Years of experience don't wait for explanation. They react. What happened? Someone shouted. There's a problem with the storage racks. Another voice called back. I was already moving. Stay here. I told Ethan and Chloe without even looking back, but I knew he wasn't going to stay. I reached the far corner of the gym in seconds. A temporary shelving unit had collapsed, sending boxes of supplies crashing down. But that wasn't the real problem. A support beam shifted, cracked. Part of the ceiling structure had dipped lower, unstable, and beneath it, a young boy, maybe 8 or 9, pinned under a section of the fallen rack, crying, panicked, his leg trapped. A volunteer knelt beside him, trying to move the debris, but clearly unsure how to do it safely. "It's not stable," someone shouted. "If we pull it wrong, the whole thing could come down." I scanned the scene quickly. Weight distribution, angles, stress points. Years of instinct took over before conscious thought could catch up. "Everyone step back," I said firmly. The room obeyed, not because they knew me, but because confidence carries its own authority. "Don't touch anything yet," I added, dropping to my knees beside the boy. "Hey," I said softly, my voice shifting instantly. Calm, steady. The way you speak when fear is louder than logic. "What's your name?" "Liam," he sobbed. "Okay, Liam," I said gently. "I need you to look at me, all right." His eyes were wide with panic, but they found mine. "That's it," I said. "You're doing great." Behind me, I could hear movement, people gathering, watching, Ethan's footsteps among them, but I didn't turn. I couldn't, because right now, nothing else mattered. "Is anyone trained in structural support?" I called out. A man stepped forward. "I've done some construction," he said. "Good," I replied. "I need you to look at that beam. Tell me where it's weakest." He hesitated for only a second before moving into position. I turned back to Liam. "Listen to me," I said softly. "We're going to get you out, but we have to do it carefully, okay?" He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "It hurts," he whispered. "I know," I said gently. "But you're being really brave." I glanced at the debris. The rack had fallen in a way that created a dangerous balance. Pull too fast, everything shifts. Too slow, the structure weakens further. "We need something to brace this," I said, thinking out loud. "Tables," someone suggested. "No," I replied immediately. "Too unstable." "Then, wood panels," the construction worker said. "Stack them vertically, reinforced from both sides." I nodded. "Yes." "Do it." People moved quickly now. Not chaotically, but with purpose, because direction had been established. Ethan stood at the edge of the circle, watching, not filming, not speaking, just watching. And for the first time, he was seeing something he couldn't dismiss. "Okay," I said, positioning myself closer to Liam. "We're going to lift this just enough to slide your leg out, but I need you to stay very still." "I'm scared," he whispered. I reached out, placing my hand gently over his. "I know," I said, "but I'm right here." The words weren't just comfort, they were a promise. And I don't make promises I can't keep. "Ready!" I called out. The volunteers nodded. "On 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted, slow, controlled. The beam creaked. The rack shifted slightly. "Hold it," I said sharply. Everything froze. The structure wavered, then steadied. "Good," I said. "Just like that. Don't move." I turned back to Liam. "Okay," I said softly. "I need you to slide your leg toward me." He hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, carefully, he moved. A small cry escaped his lips, but he didn't stop. "You're doing amazing," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Almost there. Just a little more, and then he was free. I pulled him gently toward me away from the debris. Lower it, I instructed. The volunteers carefully set the structure back down. Safe, stable. The danger had passed. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, a wave of relief moved through the room. Soft, collective. Liam clung to me, still shaking. "It's okay," I said, holding him gently. "You're safe now." Behind me, I heard something shift, not physically, emotionally. I turned, slowly. Ethan stood there, still, silent. But his face, it wasn't the same. Not confused, not angry, not even hurt. It was something deeper, something harder to hide. Respect, not forced, not reluctant, but undeniable. "You didn't even hesitate," he said quietly. I shook my head slightly. There wasn't time to. He stepped closer. "And you just knew what to do." I looked at him, really looked this time. "It's not about knowing," I said softly. "It's about choosing to act. Even when you're afraid you might be wrong." He didn't respond immediately, because he was still processing, still piecing together the version of me he thought he knew, with the one standing in front of him now. Chloe stepped beside him, her voice barely above a whisper. "She saved him," she said. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said, "but I think she's been doing that for a long time." Our eyes met, and for the first time since this all began, there was no distance between us. Just understanding beginning to take shape. Not complete, not resolved, but real. And sometimes that's where everything starts to change. Something shifted after that moment. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly in a way that couldn't be undone. Ethan didn't go back to his phone. He didn't make another joke. He didn't even try to fill the silence. Instead, he stayed. That more than anything told me everything I needed to know. I returned to the supply table slowly, my hands still carrying the faint tremor of adrenaline. Moments like that never truly leave your body right away. They echo in your pulse, in your breath, in the space between thoughts. But today, I returned to the supply table slowly, my hands still carrying the faint tremor of adrenaline. Moments like that never truly leave your body right away. They echo in your pulse, in your breath, in the space between thoughts. But today, there was something else lingering too. Ethan. I could feel him nearby without even looking. A presence that used to feel distant now close again. Uncertain, but present. "Do you need help?" he asked. The words were simple, but they landed heavier than anything he had said before. I turned to him. For a moment, I didn't answer, because I needed to understand what I was hearing. Not the words, but the intention behind them. He shifted slightly under my gaze. He added his voice quieter. "You've been doing this all day?" Still not defensive, not dismissive, just offering. And that was new. "Yes," I said gently. "I could use some help." His shoulders relaxed just a little. Not fully, but enough. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. I gestured to the table. Start by organizing these, I said. Make sure everyone gets what they need without taking too much. He nodded. Simple, direct. He stepped behind the table, beside me. Not in front, not apart. Beside. And for the first time in years, we were working side by side. Chloe joined a few moments later, offering a small smile. I'll help too, she said. The three of us stood there together, passing out supplies, answering questions, helping where we could. No tension, no argument, just action. But even in the quiet rhythm of work, I could feel it. Ethan was watching. Not constantly, not obviously, but enough. Enough to notice things. The way I spoke to people. The way I moved. The way I listened more than I talked. And slowly I saw something else begin to form. Not just understanding, respect. It didn't come all at once. It came in moments. Small ones, subtle ones, but undeniable. A middle-aged man approached the table, frustration written all over his face. This system isn't working, he said sharply. People are getting more than they need. Others are getting nothing. Before I could respond, Ethan stepped forward. We're trying to keep it fair, he said, his voice calm but firm. If you need something specific, tell me. Well, figure it out. The man frowned. I've been waiting for 30 minutes, he said. Ethan nodded. I understand, he replied. But everyone here has been through something. We're doing our best to help as many people as possible. There was no sarcasm in his voice, no impatience, just steadiness. The man hesitated, then sighed. Fine, he muttered. I just need blankets. Ethan turned slightly. We've got blankets, he said, already reaching for them. How many too? Ethan handed them over. Take care, he said simply. The man nodded and walked away. I glanced at Ethan. He didn't look at me right away, but when he did, there was something in his expression, something quiet, like he had just realized something about himself too. That's harder than it looks, he said. I smiled slightly. Yes, I said. It is. He let out a small breath. I always thought. He started, then stopped. I waited, because sometimes people need space to find the words. I always thought what you did was just handing things out, he admitted. There was no judgment in his tone now. Just honesty. It's never just that, I said softly. He nodded slowly. I can see that now. The words were simple, but they carried something deeper. Acknowledgement. Growth. Time passed, not measured in minutes, but in moments, and each one brought us closer to something we had lost, or maybe something we had never fully had before. Later that afternoon, a small group gathered near the entrance. A few new arrivals. Confused, overwhelmed, Ethan noticed before I did. I'll go, he said. I watched him walk over, not hesitating, not looking back for instruction. He spoke to them calmly, gently, guiding them, reassuring them, the way I had done so many times before. And as I watched him, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief, not pride. Something deeper, something quieter. Hope. Because for the first time, I wasn't just seeing my son as he had been. I was seeing who he could become. And maybe who he already was. When he returned, he didn't say anything. He just picked up where he left off. Working, helping, being present. Chloe leaned toward me slightly. He's changed, she whispered. I nodded. Yes, I said softly. But not because of me. She smiled gently. Maybe because he finally sees you, she said. I didn't respond, because I wasn't sure if that was true yet. Not completely. But it was a beginning, and sometimes a beginning is enough. As the day continued, the energy in the room shifted. Not chaotic, not tense, but steady, focused. People helping people. Strangers becoming something more. And in the middle of it all, Ethan stayed by my side. Not because he had to, not because anyone asked him to, but because he chose to, and that choice meant more than anything he could have said. Because for the first time, he wasn't standing outside my world. He was part of it. And maybe that was where healing truly begins. It happened quietly at first, like most turning points do. Not with a dramatic announcement, not with a clear line drawn in the sand, but in a moment that could have easily passed unnoticed if you weren't paying attention. Late in the afternoon, the flow of people began to slow. The rush of urgency softened into something more manageable. Exhaustion settled over the room like a thin layer of dust. People moved slower. Voices grew quieter. Even the air felt heavier. Ethan stood beside me, sorting through a box of medical kits. His movements were steady now, purposeful, not hesitant, not uncertain. He had found his place in the rhythm of it all. And then, "Hey!" The voice came from behind us. Sharp, casual, but edged with something familiar. Judgment. I turned slightly. Two young men stood near the table, not part of the volunteers, not part of the survivors either. Visitors, observers, the kind who come in but don't really see. One of them glanced at my vest, then at Ethan, then back at me. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said. Ethan frowned. "Do we know you?" he asked. The man smirked slightly. "Yeah," he said. "We've seen you around." His eyes moved to me again. "You're his mom, right?" Ethan's shoulders stiffened just a little. "Yes," he said. The second man chuckled. "Manny said," shaking his head, "you weren't kidding." Ethan's expression hardened. "What are you talking about?" The first man gestured casually toward my vest. "This," he said, "the whole volunteer thing." There it was, that tone, dismissive, belittling, the same tone Ethan had used just hours ago. Only now it sounded different, sharper, ugly. "I mean, no offense," the second man added, though his voice made it clear he meant the opposite, "but it's kind of embarrassing, right?" The words landed, not on me, but on Ethan. I saw it instantly, the shift in his posture, the tightening of his jaw, the way his hands stilled completely. And for a brief moment, I wondered what he would do. Because this was the moment. The one that defines more than any argument ever could. The one where you choose who you are, when no one is asking you to. Ethan didn't answer right away. He just looked at them. Long, quiet. And then, "You don't know what you're talking about," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Firm, clear, unapologetic. The two men exchanged a glance. "Oh, come on," the first one said. "We're just saying—" "No," Ethan interrupted. That alone was enough to make them pause. Because there was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty, just conviction. "You're not just saying anything," he continued. "You're judging something you don't understand." The room around us grew quieter. Not silent, but attentive. Because people recognize moments like this, even when they don't know why. The second man scoffed. "Relax," he said. "It's not that serious." Ethan took a step forward. "It is," he said. The words were simple, but they landed hard. "Be Because he meant them. You see this vest? Relax, he said. It's not that serious. Ethan took a step forward. It is, he said. The words were simple, but they landed hard. Because he meant them. You see this vest? Ethan continued gesturing toward me. You think it's just for show? Neither of the men responded. Not because they agreed, but because they weren't expecting this. Not from him. This vest means she's the one people look for when everything goes wrong, Ethan said. His voice didn't shake. Not once. She's the one who stays when everyone else leaves. My breath caught slightly, because I hadn't expected that. Not from him. Not yet. The first man shifted uncomfortably. Okay, man, we get it. She's the one who stays when everyone else leaves. My breath caught slightly. Because I hadn't expected that. Not from him. Not yet. The first man shifted uncomfortably. Okay, man, we get it. No, Ethan said again, more firmly this time. You don't. Silence. The kind that doesn't need to be enforced. It just happens. You think this is embarrassing? Ethan continued. Let me tell you something. He gestured around the room. At the people, the families, the quiet resilience that filled the space. Everyone here, he said. They're standing because someone like her showed up when it mattered. His voice softened slightly, but the strength didn't fade. I didn't understand that before, he admitted. That part surprised me the most, because he wasn't just defending me. He was telling the truth, his truth. But I do now, he said. The two men didn't have a response anymore, not a real one, because confidence built on truth is hard to argue with. Maybe next time, Ethan added, his voice steady, you should think before you talk about things you've never experienced. The words weren't cruel. They weren't aggressive, but they were final. The kind that closes a conversation without needing anything else. The two men exchanged another glance. Then one of them shrugged. Whatever, he muttered. They walked away, just like that. No apology, no acknowledgement. But it didn't matter, because the moment had already happened. Ethan stood there for a second longer, breathing slowly. Then he turned back toward the table, like nothing had happened, like it wasn't a big deal. But it was. It was everything. I looked at him, really looked this time, and I saw it clearly. The change, not just in what he said, but in who he had become in that moment. You didn't have to do that, I said softly. He shrugged slightly. Yeah, he said. I did. The simplicity of his answer. It broke something open inside me, not painfully, but gently, like something that had been closed for too long finally letting light in. He hesitated for a moment, then added more quietly. They were wrong. I nodded. Yes, I said, but you used to think the same thing. He didn't deny it, didn't look away. I know, he said. That honesty, that willingness to face it, it meant more than any apology. I was wrong, he added. The words were quiet, but they carried weight, because they weren't easy for him to say. I stepped closer, not all the way, not fully, but enough. That doesn't make you a bad person, I said gently. He let out a small breath. I thought it did, he admitted. I shook my head. No, I said. It just means you're learning. He looked at me then, really looked. And this time, there was no distance, no misunderstanding, just something real, something honest. I didn't see you before, he said. The words were simple, but they held everything. I smiled softly. I'm still the same person, I replied. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. I just finally see you. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. Not after all these years. Not after everything we had been through. We weren't just repairing something. We were building something new, something stronger, something honest. And maybe that was even better than what we had lost. The sun had started to set by the time the room finally quieted. Not completely. Places like this never truly become silent. But the urgency had softened. The chaos had settled into something steadier, something survivable. Warm light filtered through the high windows of the gym, casting long shadows across the rows of cots. People rested where they could. Volunteers moved slower now, exhaustion catching up with them. And in the middle of it all, Ethan stood beside me. But not working this time. Not moving. Just there. Waiting. I could feel it before he said anything. That tension. That hesitation. The kind that comes when someone is about to say something that matters. Mom. His voice was quiet. Almost careful. I turned to him. He didn't meet my eyes right away. Instead, he looked down at his hands clasped tightly together, like he was trying to hold something in place. He started, then stopped. Took a breath. Tried again. I don't think I've ever really talked to you, he said. The words caught me off guard. Not because they weren't true, but because he had finally said them. Out loud. I mean, actually talked, he added. I didn't interrupt. Because this moment, it wasn't mine to guide. It was his to find. I always thought I understood you, he continued slowly. I thought I knew exactly who you were. He let out a quiet breath, and I built everything around that. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pain, not regret. Just recognition. Because I had done the same. In my own way. I told myself a story, he said. That you cared more about strangers than your own family. That you chose your work over us. His voice tightened slightly. That you chose them over Dad. The word lingered, but this time it didn't cut the same way. Because something in his tone had changed. I held on to that, he said. For years. He finally looked up at me, and in his eyes, there was no anger anymore. Just something raw, honest. And I used it, he admitted. The words were heavy. I used it as a reason to keep my distance, to not ask questions, to not try. I swallowed slowly, because this was the truth I had never forced him to face, until now. I told myself I was protecting myself, he continued, that I didn't need to understand you. A small, almost bitter smile touched his lips. But really, I was just afraid. That surprised me, more than anything else he had said, afraid of what I asked gently. He hesitated, then answered honestly. Afraid that if I understood you, I wouldn't be able to blame you anymore. The words settled between us. Quiet, powerful, and completely real. I felt something inside me soften, not because he had apologized yet, but because he had finally seen himself clearly. I was angry for a long time, he said. I know, I replied softly. He nodded. I thought I had the right to be. You did, I said. That made him look up again, surprised. I did. I was angry, for a long time, he said. I know, I replied softly. He nodded. I thought I had the right to be. You did, I said. That made him look up again, surprised. I did, he asked. Yes, I said. You lost your father, and you didn't understand why. I paused, and I didn't help you understand. The truth of that settled over both of us, not as blame, but as shared responsibility. Ethan exhaled slowly. I wish you had told me, he said. I know, I replied. I wish I had too. Silence followed. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It wasn't suffocating. It was open, like something had finally been cleared between us. I saw you today, he said after a moment. The words were simple, but they carried everything. Not just what you did, he added, but who you are. My throat tightened slightly, and I don't think I've ever been more wrong about someone in my life. I shook my head gently. You weren't wrong, I said. He frowned slightly. Yes, I was. No, I said. You just didn't have the whole truth. He considered that, then nodded slowly. Maybe, he said. Another pause. Then, I'm sorry. The words were quiet, but they didn't need to be loud, because they were real. I'm sorry for the way I treated you, he continued, for the things I said, for not seeing you. His voice wavered slightly. And that was when I knew this wasn't just an apology. It was something deeper, something that had taken years to reach this point. I'm sorry I made you feel like what you did didn't matter, he added. I stepped closer. Not all the way, but enough. You don't have to carry all of that, I said gently. He shook his head. I do, he said, because it's true. I studied his face, the sincerity, the vulnerability, the honesty that hadn't been there before, and I realized something. This wasn't about guilt. This was about growth. I forgive you, I said softly. The words came easily because they had been waiting. Not for him to be perfect, but for him to be ready. He let out a breath, a long one, like he had been holding it for years. Thank you, he said. I reached out slowly, placing my hand over his. Not as a gesture, not as a symbol, but as something simple, something real. Connection. He didn't pull away. He didn't hesitate. He just held on. And for the first time in a very long time, we stood there, not as two people separated by years of misunderstanding, but as a mother and a son, finding their way back to each other. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. And sometimes that's the kind of healing that lasts. Evening settled over the shelter like a quiet exhale. The kind that comes after a long, exhausting day when the worst has passed, but the weight of it still lingers in every corner of the room. Lights flickered on overhead, soft, dimmer than before. People began preparing for the night, adjusting blankets, checking on loved ones, finding small pockets of rest wherever they could. And somehow, in the middle of it all, something else was happening. Something quieter, but just as powerful. It started with Laura. She approached again, more composed now, though her eyes still carried that same depth of emotion. I've been thinking, she said softly, looking between Ethan and me. I nodded slightly. What about? I asked. She hesitated for just a moment, then turned toward Ethan. You deserve to know something, she said. Ethan straightened slightly, his expression attentive. "What is it?" he asked. Laura glanced around the room, at the people, at the lives that had intersected here in ways no one could have predicted. Then she spoke. "Your mother didn't just help people," she said. "She changed them." The words landed differently than before, not as a revelation, but as confirmation. Ethan didn't interrupt, didn't question. He just listened. "When we got out of that fire," Laura continued, "I thought it was over." She shook her head slightly. "But it wasn't." Her voice softened. "I was terrified of everything after that. Loud sounds, smoke, even driving." She paused. "But I remembered her." She gestured gently toward me. The way she stayed calm. The way she made us feel like we were going to be okay, even when everything was falling apart. Her eyes met mine, and I held on to that. Something in my chest tightened. Because I had never thought about it that way. "Not like this. You didn't just save us that day," Laura said. "You taught me how to survive after it." The room had grown quieter again. Not because people were told to listen, but because they wanted to. Mr. Dawson stepped forward next. "She's right," he said. "When I lost my house, I thought I'd lost everything." He let out a slow breath. "But she didn't just get us out of the water." He looked at Ethan. "She stayed," he said. "After the cameras were gone, after the reporters left, after everyone else moved on." His voice carried a quiet strength. "She made sure we had somewhere to go, helped us figure out what came next." He shook his head slightly. "Most people show up for the moment." His eyes moved to me again. "She showed up for what came after." More voices followed. Not all at once, not overwhelming, but steady, intentional. A young woman stepped forward. "She helped me find my brother after the tornado," she said. An older couple spoke next. "She checked on us every day after the hurricane." Another voice. "She made sure my kids had school supplies when we lost everything." Each story was small on its own, but together they formed something larger. Something undeniable. Not a single act, not a single moment, but a lifetime of quiet impact. Ethan stood in the center of it all, not speaking, not moving, just absorbing. And I could see it in his face. The final pieces falling into place. Not just understanding what I had done, but understanding who I had been. And why. Chloe stepped closer to him, her voice soft. "This is who she's always been," she said. Ethan nodded slowly. "I know," he replied, and this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. He turned toward me, and for a moment he didn't say anything, because there are moments when words aren't enough. Moments when understanding speaks louder than anything you can say. "I used to think success looked like what I built," he said, finally. His voice was steady, but quieter than before. "Titles, money, recognition." He glanced around the room, at the people, at the lives that had been touched in ways no one could measure. "But this," he continued, "this is something else." I didn't respond, because this wasn't about me correcting him. This was about him discovering something for himself. "This is real," he said. His eyes met mine. And I didn't see it. I stepped closer. "You see it now," I said gently. He nodded. "Yes," he said, "I do." Another silence followed, but this one wasn't heavy. It wasn't filled with regret. It was peaceful, like something had finally settled into place. Laura reached out, touching my hand briefly. "You don't get to choose how people remember you," she said softly. "But I'm glad I get to tell you how we do." I smiled faintly, not out of pride, but out of something quieter. Gratitude for the lives that had intersected with mine, for the moments that had mattered, even when I hadn't fully understood how. Ethan watched all of it, every word, every expression, every connection, and I could see it clearly now. He wasn't just seeing my past, he was redefining his own. Because understanding someone changes how you see yourself too. I think he started, then paused, then tried again. "I think I spent so long measuring things the wrong way." I tilted my head slightly. "What do you mean?" He looked around once more, then back at me. "I thought impact had to be big," he said. "Visible, recognized." He shook his head. "But this," he gestured to the room. "It's not about being seen." I smiled softly. "No," I said. "It's about showing up." He let out a small breath. "Yeah," he said. "That's it." For the first time, he wasn't trying to impress. He wasn't trying to define. He was just understanding. And that understanding, that quiet shift in how he saw the world, that was the real turning point. Not the recognition, not the stories, but the change within him. Because that's what lasts. Not what people say about you, but what someone learns from you. And as the night settled fully over the shelter, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to believe before. Not after all these years, not after everything we had been through. I hadn't lost everything that day. Not completely. Because standing here in this moment, I had found something I thought was gone forever. My son. Not the version shaped by distance and misunderstanding, but the one who could see, who could feel, who could choose differently. And maybe that was the kind of ending I had never expected, but always needed. The night stretched on quietly. Not empty, not silent, but full in a way that only comes after something has been broken and carefully slowly put back together again. Most people had settled into sleep or something close to it. Soft murmurs replaced the earlier chaos. Blankets rustled. Breathing steadied. The world for a moment felt held together. I stood near the entrance of the shelter, watching the dim glow of streetlights outside. The air beyond the doors carried that faint, familiar scent smoke mixed with damp earth. The kind of smell that lingers after disaster. The kind that stays long after everything else has moved on. "Can't sleep either." Ethan's voice came from behind me. I turned slightly. He walked over, hands in his pockets, his posture more relaxed than I had seen in years. "No," I admitted. "It takes time for the body to catch up." He nodded. "I think I understand that now," he said. We stood there for a moment, side by side, looking out at the quiet world beyond the glass. "I used to hate this smell," he said after a while. I glanced at him. "The smoke," he clarified. "It reminded me of everything." I understood. Of course I did. "Does it still?" I asked. He paused, then shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "Not the same way." There was something in his voice, not absence of memory, but a shift in meaning. "It smells like survival now," he added. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said softly, "it does." Another silence followed, but this one, it wasn't about distance. It wasn't about things unsaid. It was comfortable, the kind of silence that exists between people who no longer need to fill it. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. I glanced at him again. "That's usually a dangerous sign," I teased lightly. He smiled. "A real one. Not forced, not guarded." "Yeah," he said. "Probably." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I spent so much time trying to build a life that looked successful," he said. "I thought if I got everything right, I wouldn't feel like something was missing." His voice softened. "But I think I built it on the wrong foundation." I listened, not interrupting, because this wasn't about correcting him. This was about him finding his own way. "I built it around control," he said, "around things I could measure." He looked down briefly. "But life doesn't work like that, does it?" I shook my head. "Work like that, does it?" I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "It doesn't." He exhaled slowly. "I see that now." He turned slightly toward me. "And I see you now." The words were simple, but the why carried everything. "I'm proud of you," gently. "No," I said. "It doesn't." He exhaled slowly. "I see that now." He turned slightly toward me. "And I see you now." The words were simple, but they carried everything. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. He blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" he asked. "For being willing to change," I replied. "That's not easy." He let out a small breath. "I learned from the best," he said. I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "You learned because you chose to. That mattered. More than anything else. Because growth. It can't be forced. It has to be chosen." We stood there a while longer. Then Ethan spoke again. "I was thinking," he said carefully, "maybe I could come back?" I looked at him. "To help," he clarified. "Not just here, but wherever you go." The words settled into me slowly, because I hadn't expected that. Not fully. Not yet. "You don't have to do that," I said gently. "I know," he replied. "That's why I want to." There it was again. Choice. Not obligation, not guilt, but intention. "It won't be easy," I said. "I know," he said. "You'll see things that stay with you." "I think I already have," he admitted. I studied his face, the sincerity, the steadiness, the quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "Okay," I said, and for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt open. Chloe joined us a few minutes later, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool air. "You two look serious," she said lightly. "Just talking," Ethan replied. She smiled. "Well, that's new," she teased. We all laughed softly, not because it was particularly funny, but because it felt normal. And sometimes, normal is the most healing thing of all. A volunteer called from across the room asking for help with the late arrival. Without hesitation, I turned. "I'll go," I said. But this time, Ethan stepped forward too. "I've got it," he said. I paused, watching him. He met my eyes, a quiet understanding passing between us. "Together?" he asked. I smiled. "Together." We walked across the room side by side, not as strangers, not as people trying to bridge a gap, but as something simpler, stronger. Family. And as we knelt beside the new arrival, As we listened, as we helped, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to believe before. Healing doesn't erase the past. It doesn't rewrite it. But it changes how you carry it. And sometimes that's enough. Because in the end, it's not about the mistakes we make or the moments we miss. It's about what we do when we're given another chance. And tonight, we were. Together. Here is PH, 1,000 to 1,200 words, KTHCECHALLNH, show, N2N, closure, SUS, PH, 15. The night stretched on quietly, not empty, not silent, but full in a way that only comes after something has been broken and carefully, slowly put back together again. Most people had settled into sleep or something close to it. Soft murmurs replaced the earlier chaos. Blankets rustled. Breathing steadied. The world, for a moment, felt held together. I stood near the entrance of the shelter, watching the dim glow of streetlights outside. The air beyond the doors carried that faint, familiar scent smoke mixed with damp earth. The kind of smell that lingers after disaster. The kind that stays long after everything else has moved on. Can't sleep either. Ethan's voice came from behind me. I turned slightly. He walked over, hands in his pockets, his posture more relaxed than I had seen in years. "No," I admitted. "It takes time for the body to catch up." He nodded. "I think I understand that now," he said. We stood there for a moment, side by side, looking out at the quiet world beyond the glass. "I used to hate this smell," he said after a while. I glanced at him. "The smoke," he clarified. "It reminded me of everything." I understood. Of course I did. "Does it still?" I asked. He paused, then shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "Not the same way." There was something in his voice, not absence of memory, but a shift in meaning. "It smells like survival now," he added. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said softly. "It does." Another silence followed. But this one, it wasn't about distance. It wasn't about things unsaid. It was comfortable. The kind of silence that exists between people who no longer need to fill it. "I've been thinking," Ethan said. I glanced at him again. "That's usually a dangerous sign," I teased lightly. He smiled. A real one. Not forced. Not guarded. "Yeah," he said. "Probably." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I spent so much time trying to build a life that looks successful," he said. "I thought if I got everything right, I wouldn't feel like something was missing." His voice softened. "But I think I built it on the wrong foundation." I listened, not interrupting, because this wasn't about correcting him. This was about him finding his own way. "I built it around control," he said, "around things I could measure." He looked down briefly. "But life doesn't work like that, does it?" I shook my head. "Work like that, does it?" I shook my head gently. "No," I said. "It doesn't." He exhaled slowly. "I see that now." He turned slightly toward me. "And I see you now." The words were simple, but the why carried everything. "I'm proud of you," gently. "No," I said, "it doesn't." He exhaled slowly. "I see that now." He turned slightly toward me. "And I see you now." The words were simple, but they carried everything. "I'm proud of you," I said quietly. He blinked, caught off guard. "For what?" he asked. "For being willing to change," I replied. "That's not easy." He let out a small breath. "I learned from the best," he said. I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. "You learned because you chose to. That mattered, more than anything else. Because growth, it can't be forced. It has to be chosen." We stood there a while longer. Then Ethan spoke again. "I was thinking," he said, carefully. "Maybe I could come back." I looked at him. "To help," he clarified. "Not just here, but wherever you go." The words settled into me slowly, because I hadn't expected that. Not fully. Not yet. "You don't have to do that," I said gently. "I know," he replied. "That's why I want to." There it was again. Choice. Not obligation, not guilt, but intention. "It won't be easy," I said. "I know," he said. "You'll see things that stay with you." "I think I already have," he admitted. I studied his face. The sincerity, the steadiness, the quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "Okay," I said. And for the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel uncertain. It felt open. Chloe joined us a few minutes later, wrapping her arms around herself against the cool air. "You two look serious," she said lightly. "Just talking," Ethan replied. She smiled. "Well, that's new," she teased. We all laughed softly. Not because it was particularly funny, but because it felt normal. And sometimes, normal is the most healing thing of all. A volunteer called from across the room, asking for help with a late arrival. Without hesitation, I turned. "I'll go," I said. But this time, Ethan stepped forward too. "I've got it," he said. I paused, watching him. He met my eyes, a quiet understanding passing between us. "Together?" he asked. I smiled. Together. We walked across the room side by side, not as strangers, not as people trying to bridge a gap, but as something simpler, stronger. Family. And as we knelt beside the new arrival, as we listened, as we helped, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to believe before. Healing doesn't erase the past. It doesn't rewrite it, but it changes how you carry it. And sometimes, that's enough. Because in the end, it's not about the mistakes we make or the moments we miss. It's about what we do when we're given another chance. And tonight, we were together. Sometimes the people we misunderstand the most are the ones who carry the heaviest truths. We judge what we don't see. We build stories in our minds to protect ourselves from pain, from confusion, from questions we're too afraid to ask. But the truth is, every person is fighting battles we don't fully understand. Every decision has a cost we may never see. And sometimes love doesn't look like staying. Sometimes love looks like sacrifice, like showing up where you're needed most, like carrying pain silently so someone else doesn't have to. Monica didn't just save lives, she carried them, in her heart, in her choices, in the moments no one ever applauded. And Ethan, he reminds us of something just as important. It's never too late to see someone differently. It's never too late to admit we were wrong. And it's never too late to rebuild something we thought was lost forever. So I want to ask you, have you ever misunderstood someone you love? Have you ever judged someone before knowing their full story? If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from? What time is it for you right now? And if you believe in second chances, in healing. in the quiet strength of people who choose to keep going. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because stories like this, they remind us what truly matters. And sometimes that reminder can change everything.